Welcome to the Pet Loss Companion. I'm Ken Dolan-Del Vecchio, and I'm here with my friend and co-author Nancy Saxton-Lopez. And this is a program that we do live every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time for about a half hour. And it's an opportunity to take the knowledge and everything that we gain through doing pet loss support groups, through facilitating pet loss support groups for many, many years, 30 plus years in Nancy's case, and building upon 12 or 13 years in my case. And we took all the information we gathered for a long time. We compiled it into a book called The Pet Loss Companion: Healing Advice from Family Therapists Who Lead Pet Loss Groups. And there's a link to that book in the description below. But this medium gives us the opportunity to go farther and reach farther and to have a conversation with you and with lots of people who are probably going through a very hard time. And we do want to have a conversation with you. And so we invite you to send us your own stories, to send us recommendations for guests, to send us recommendations for topics. And if you send us an email, we will respond to it. One or both of us will respond to it. And if it's acceptable to you, we will very likely read your story or share it on the program, because we know that doing so is very helpful to many people. It really helps others to hear what you've gone through, because undoubtedly it will resonate very strongly with some of the audience members. So let us know if you send us an email whether it's okay to share your story with others. And as I said, it's okay, absolutely okay if you prefer that we didn't.
Right.
So you can reach me at kenddv@gmail.com. That's KENDDV@gmail.com. You can reach Nancy at nsaxtonlopez at csmpc.com. That is NSAXTONLOPEZ at csmpc.com. You can support our work through a number of avenues. You can give us a gift through Venmo or PayPal. You can do a monthly subscription. All of the above ways of providing some financial support are in the description. We always say this as an invitation, not an expectation. No, it's okay if you don't. We're really grateful if you do, but we do this because we know that it's helpful to people, and that's the primary reason we do it, although it doesn't hurt, of course, to have some financial support. This program is a friend of Dakin Humane Society in Springfield, Mass. You can learn more about Dakin at DAKINHUMANE.org. And one of the great things that Dakin does, and they do very many, they're a shelter, and they do lots of programs to try to help us with the human-animal bond in a number of different ways. But one of the things that they do is they sponsor a cost-free Zoom pet loss support group that I facilitate once a month. It's generally on the second Tuesday of the month and runs 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. You will find an RSVP linked in the program description, and it's cost-free, and anybody can join from anywhere in the world. And I mean anywhere in the world. We've had people from all across the US and from other continents across the world. The next meeting will be on Tuesday the 14th, so it's actually on Valentine's Day. So feel free to join us. We always have a very lively and heartfelt, mutually supportive conversation. We had this month's program just a couple of days ago. Please consider subscribing to our program on YouTube. There's a link to the YouTube channel if you're not watching this on YouTube, if you're watching on one of the podcast outlets. If you will do us the favor of subscribing, that would be really helpful, because as you probably know, it puts the program at a higher place on the list of resources that are available to people when they look for pet loss on YouTube. So it affects the algorithm in a way that raises the standing of this program. So if you find this program useful, please consider subscribing on YouTube, because it'll help the program get before other people who are likely going to find some benefit in it as well. So we'll stop there, and Nancy will get us started with this evening's discussion.
Yeah, we have a very heartbreaking story, and This is from Susan, and it has to do with the tragic death of the family dog. And sometimes we have run into that in the groups we've done for a long time or people that we've worked with, that there's an accident that happens. And it could be a family member that's involved or a friend that's involved or, somebody close to, the family that has the companion animal. Like one time it was one of the dog sitters, right? That there was an accident.
Yep.
And so I'm going to read the story. It is hard. And then we're going to discuss it because unfortunately these tragedies do happen. So, Susan starts with your podcast was suggested to me after I recently lost my 14-and-a-half-year-old dog in a tragic way. The loss has been particularly difficult because, in my opinion, my husband is responsible for my dog's death. It's been 9 days and I'm still angry at him. I'm not sure I can ever fully forgive him. I'm hoping you can help me look at the situation from a different angle. We moved into a new home in May 2021. At that time, both me and my husband were full time telecommuting due to the pandemic. The new home has a pool in the backyard. My husband talked me out of putting up a fence around the pool, stating it was really unnecessary. My concern was that my then 12-year-old dog with poor vision would fall into the pool and drown. My husband blew this off as catastrophic thinking, and I'm an anxious person and vigilant with safety. I dropped the idea of putting the fence up because I was working from home and my dog only ever went outside um, to go potty and drink from a bucket of water. Since I was working from home, I could watch him do his business and then let him back inside. This worked for, a year and a half. During that time, he never fell in the pool. Recently, I started going into the office once a week. My husband still telecommuted full time. On December 21st, when I went to the office, my husband called me at work around 3. He told me he had some bad news to share. My dog had died. He drowned in the pool. When asked how this happened, he told me he had let the dog out to do his business and went upstairs to take a shower. When he came back down, the dog was not waiting at the door to be let back in. My husband went outside, and that's when he made the discovery. My husband knew I was concerned about the dog falling in the pool. In addition, he knew the dog was nearly blind. Even so, he carelessly went upstairs to take a shower, essentially forgetting about the dog. This was a preventable death. I am familiar with the various stages of grief. I never went through denial, but I went straight to anger, where I remain. Of course, I also feel intense sadness for my dog and the manner in which he died. Drowning in the pool in the cold. I'm just so mad. Mad because I feel my husband didn't care about my feelings or the safety of my dog, and mad because I knew my husband wasn't as vigilant as me, yet I didn't take any steps to ensure my dog's safety around the pool during my absences when I couldn't be watching him. My rationale for not taking any additional safety precautions is that everything worked fine up until now. However, I didn't anticipate my husband would leave my dog outside for a half an hour or longer. I haven't spoken to my husband about my feelings as I believe I would erupt in anger. He never loved the dog the way I did, and so he's not taking the loss as hard as I am. He gave me a hug when I got home from work that day and said he was sorry. I lashed out at him later that night, bringing up that I thought I was irrational for thinking the dog would drown in the pool. I quickly dropped it and did not engage, acknowledging it didn't matter. My dog was gone. I'm still barely speaking or looking at him. I'm trying to take solace knowing my dog had a long, happy life and that he likely was not going to be around much longer due to ailing health. His Cushing's disease was worsening. He was vomiting 2 or 3 times a week for unknown reasons, etc. I should also mention that due to his Cushing's, his need to go out to drink and go potty was almost incessant at times. I'm sure I let him out about 15 times a day. Nonetheless, I love my dog very, very much, and this was so unnecessary. I don't know if I can fully forgive my husband. Your insight is appreciated.
So we wanted to highlight this story because it is such an unfortunate but
Mm.
common experience
Yeah.
that people they have some kind of responsibility, let's say, for the circumstances that resulted in their pet's death.
Mhm.
And so here we have a person who says that she's trying to move past anger. We really want to thank Susan
Susan for
really,
doing,
really
yeah,
for
this is a
doing,
hard
and
thing
her
to talk
husband, because
about.
they both
Yes.
agreed to
Of
let us
course,
share the story. So we so appreciate
I'm sure
their
he's grieving too.
vulnerability. And we got back to Susan, both Nancy and I, and we gave her some comments. One of which is that for 2.5 years, this dog who was losing his vision had never once fallen in the pool.
Right,
And so it would be common for people who had this dog to think, well, they're navigating around the pool, right?
right.
And
He knows where he's going.
he knows where he's going. He hasn't had this accident. At the same time, it doesn't excuse not watching, but at the
Right.
same time, it makes sense that you would begin to feel like this, he's got it down somehow. He's figured this out, because animals do. I mean, they figure out
Mhm.
sometimes what obstacles they need to avoid. The other thing that struck me, and this is something that I notice when I take my own dogs out, and they have an area to run, and pretty substantial area to run that's fenced, and I'm with them when they go out to use the bathroom, and but I'm not watching them every second.
Of
Like,
course, we don't usually.
you can't keep your eyes on them
Right.
every second. Like, sometimes I might be looking at my phone, checking an email, or I might be paying a little bit of attention to the chickens who are making a noise, and the chicken coop is right near where they run. I just might be in my thoughts. And so I'm imagining, if you are trying to watch for years this dog go out and walk around and do his business, there are gonna be moments where you just don't you
You
can't
don't pay any
you
ti
can't see.
you miss looking at them. You're doing
Yeah.
something else, or you're thinking about something else.
And also, in during the workday, it's hard if you're working from home and you have to do something like this, and you have to do the basics, like take a shower and make lunch and breakfast and all of that, and you have to let the dog out.
And in this
And
case, right, he needed to be let out quite a few times a
yeah,
day
that's another
because
point.
right,
Because he wasn't entirely well, he had to go out a lot,
right.
as elder dogs often do.
Mhm.
And so what we recommended was that they just open a conversation about it,
Yeah, they
that they
needed to
have a
talk about
discussion
it.
about it, and
Mhm.
that we thought that they were probably both avoiding this because it hurts. It's
Painful.
painful. Yeah.
And I
And,
can't imagine that he wasn't feeling guilty about what happened.
and it's interesting because, of course, what we learned was, and one of the things that I was trying to be very, very careful in my response, and I said, this is the kind of thing that, depending on how things are between the two of you, you may want to open this in the company of a therapist,
Right.
so that you have like a holding environment
Mm,
for the conversation. But it sounds like Susan took our input. It was very similar, the input
mhm.
that we gave. And she said that her feelings shifted pretty quickly. And she did have a conversation with her husband, and he responded in exactly the way you might anticipate, in that he was very sad and he felt very badly about this. And
Yeah,
they just needed to be with each other in their grief, right?
right. That's right.
And
And I
she
think what happened is because, in this kind of case, someone could get extremely angry immediately, right? Of course, because the thought was, well, you know, that person should have been watching, right? I mean, this
Right.
is what we've had a conversation for with. So it took a little bit of time then for, in this case, Susan, it could have been any partner or any person in a family, to kind of step back and say, look, we need to have a discussion about this, because I know that in this case, and it could be in others, the husband in this case felt very badly about that. He felt that he could have easily felt that I caused this poor
Absolutely.
dog's
Yeah.
death.
Yeah.
And so, and he didn't know what to do with that, right?
Yeah.
Everybody grieves differently.
Yeah.
So he stepped back and just held it, even though he did hug her when Susan got home. But so pulls up so many different types of feelings in these kind of tragedies. Right.
Yeah, and one of the things that she said too, I mean, very honest, very forthright, and she said, I understood that part of this was my own guilt, that I was protecting myself from my own
Mhm.
feelings of guilt for not putting up a fence or for not paying
Exactly.
attention. What
Or
and
knowing, right, that I needed to do something or make sure that, even if when I wasn't there,
right.
that the dog would be protected.
And
Right.
and so it was just such a heartfelt and detailed and useful account of the kinds of things that sometimes go wrong,
Mhm.
and what they can do to us, what they can do to relationships, and how important it is
Absolutely.
to do what Susan and her husband did, which is they reconnected and they
Yeah.
talked about it and they held each other, and they probably are having more conversations about this.
Yeah.
And we do the best we can. One of the things you have to keep in mind is that accidents happen.
And
I
it's
mean, accidents
and it's
happen.
very they're horrible and they're painful and they're just so tragic, but they do happen. And
Yeah.
we've heard many of these, right?
Oh, I mean, I think we shared some of them with
Yeah.
Susan. I told her that there was my son had a kitten who he loved, loved dearly, and her name was Willie. And Willie got somehow into the the crawl space between two floors, and unbeknownst to us, got a hold of some kind of poison that had been there from a previous
Oh,
owner. So they'd put it, somebody had put like rat poison or mouse poison. And Willie came down and was dying. And we
yeah.
had no idea what was going on,
No,
but we
rat poison
but
is brutal.
yeah,
It's a
so there
brutal
was
drug.
a necropsy, and it was my son was very young at the time. It was
Mhm.
very, very it was painful for all of us, and we felt very the adults, his mom and I felt very responsible because, we didn't know we needed to protect her from that. And so, but yet, of course, we're going to feel guilty. I've heard stories about little, and again, shared a whole bunch of these with Susan, that there was a little dog who his guardian had put his lead on the foot of a couch, and then had left the room for a time, came back, and the dog had leapt over the couch and
And
hanged
strangled.
itself.
Mhm.
And, I mean, who would guess that such a thing would happen? You
Well,
know?
I mean, at the group, there was a young woman who came, and this is many years ago, and she was involved with a young man. And when she went to work, he was working from home, I guess, and she would bring her dog over to him with his dog, right? He had a dog
Mhm.
too. And so, they were playing, right? They liked to play and run around together, which was always the case, right? What had happened.
Which my
And
dogs
one
do all the
morning,
time.
what
Yep.
was that?
My dogs do all the time.
All the time, right? So he was making tea and he was boiling water,
Oh, boy. Yeah, I know this one.
and the dogs were running, and one of the dogs, plowed into him, and he doused her dog with boiling water.
Wow.
He doesn't mean to.
Of
It
course.
was a tragic act. The dog did die. And so she was coming to the group to kind of work through this. She was still with the young man that that they
Mhm.
were boyfriend, girlfriend. And he felt horrific. But there was nothing that he could have done differently, right? It was a tragic accident.
Yeah, yeah, and well, I'll interject that we have hi from Margaret from Scotland again. So nice to have
Mhm.
Margaret with us.
Margaret.
And, we're getting some hearts and thumbs up. So I'm glad the conversation is striking some people in a
Yeah,
way
I
that
mean,
is
and
helpful.
unfortunately, that's the pain, right? That something could have, if this accident hadn't happened, obviously their animal, their cat, their dog, whatever animal they have would be living, And then there's somebody that's kind of you want to. What happens for us is we want to blame somebody, right? Because it's so painful and horrible. But then it is just an accident. Sometimes it
And
happens.
and oh boy, the thing, we've had people who we had a young couple once, as you'll probably recall, who were fond of taking their dog hiking,
Mhm.
and they would let their dog off the leash when they were hiking, and they'd done this a lot. They'd done it many times, and their dog got hit by a train.
Yes, I remember this couple.
And
Yeah,
they both came to the meeting, and they were,
yeah.
they were appropriately very distressed, and they talked about how they had worked through that. I mean, they were very emotionally intelligent, I would say, young couple. And but what a horror. I mean, what a horror.
To actually witness that
Yeah,
also,
to witness it. And
right.
then, they talked about how they went about trying to memorialize. And I mean, I won't go into the details, but it was really unpleasant what they did to try to um, really to collect their dog's body and
Yeah.
then bury it. And that takes a lot of mutual understanding, and mutual forgiveness and all that kind of stuff. And it's the kind, we've had people who are walking their dog, and the dog steps out of off the
It gets
curb.
hit by a car.
Yeah, yeah, and
Or people inadvertently run over their animal. They don't
yeah,
know that the animal's in the driveway.
yeah,
Or looking, being around with family, having pizza, and giving the dog a piece of crust and chokes to death. So, I mean, it's it's helping those people understand, which we're trying to help Susan with, and did, I believe, that accidents just happen and they're horrific and horrible, but that doesn't take away the relationship that they had up to that time, and the love and caring and the connection that they had, and to try to come together with the family members, like in this case,
that's
her husband.
the point that's so important, is you've got
Yeah,
to reconnect,
yeah,
no matter how you're feeling about, because as you said, it's a very important point that you made, that we tend to want to blame
somebody.
somebody. And if there's any possible clue or hint of a reason that we can latch on to, we're likely to do that. I mean, we often will blame ourselves, but
Yes, we could do that too,
if there's an opportunity to say
to blame
who
somebody
else had a
else.
role in this, we're probably going to do it. And we probably need to acknowledge that and talk with that person, particularly if they're very close to us and dear to us. We don't want this to be something that becomes unmentionable, that sort of stands between us.
Right.
And that's what this couple was really able to do, is to talk it
Well,
through.
thank goodness they could, and because sometimes it's hard to have those conversations, right? Because
Very
there's
hard.
so many emotions around. Well,
Yeah,
even our story last week, I think, was with the dog was left with a friend. I
yeah,
think one of the stories, right?
yeah,
And when something was, the dog had been sick, there was something going on with the dog, and when she flew back from to where she was, and this good friend, I mean, the
right.
dog was in horrible shape,
Yeah, it was
right?
really
And
bad.
and
Shoot through his
and
ankle.
so that would be have a conversation with that person, right? Because I'm sure that she was really upset. Um, but these it's important to step back and to a lot. I mean, the grief is horrific because it's a sudden death and a tragic death, and then to try to connect to those around you, because nobody was what nobody was malicious with this. They just happened, right, these things.
No, I've been having some technical difficulties.
Yeah, I
I
see that.
wanted to show this. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt,
That's fine.
but let's take a look at this. Here's a comment. I'm angry at myself for letting a vet say my dog's euthanasia. Say my dog's euthanasia.
At that moment, right.
Why do they bully a pet owner in this situation? The dog is old with health issues. My dog's health was failing, but he was not dying that night. I could have brought her home and scheduled a more peaceful appointment the next day. I'm angry at myself and broke my promise to my sweet baby and to myself. I wanted it to be a peaceful transition. and it was
It was
rushed, not what
rushed
she
and not what
deserved.
she deserved. This happened. We've heard this story multiple. Thank you. I think it was Angela.
Yeah,
Thank you
or
for
more.
sharing that,
It was a
Angela.
little
I
bit
know
more.
that
It's been
that
over
was
a week.
hard. But we hear that a lot because there's such this pressure and stress, and you're already so upset and so anxious and so frightened, and a lot of vets, they will make the older vets, not so much, I don't think the younger vets, but the older vets will say, well, it's time, you really need to do this. And I can understand her agony around that.
Absolutely, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I mean, if to do it again, I know that she would try to do something different.
It's such a tricky balance because sometimes I feel like the vets, obviously they know more than most of us. They've
Right,
seen they've seen death over and over and over again. And I feel like sometimes what they're saying to us is, your dog is in the throes of dying,
right.
and I think it would be a kindness to them
At this
to
moment,
to
you
end
do.
their suffering. I've had that experience a few times actually. And it's it, but the thing is, it's all in how they do it.
It's all on
It's all in
yes,
how you say it.
how they present it, what they say, and I do think that, and I know, Angela, again, this is hard, and I'm sorry that you're struggling with that and feeling guilty about that.
And
Um,
just to add, she says it's been 9 days and can't move
of
beyond that
course,
time.
it's gonna be a period of
Yeah,
time.
9 days is
Hard.
unfortunately is not
It's just so
all
new.
that
It's
long
just so,
given the
it just
circumstance.
happened. Um, and so, it's helping you move through. We talk about guilt a lot, and I think she's angry at herself and feeling guilty. And the unfortunate part about guilt that it takes a while. It's the last emotion that really can be worked through, right? Because you're blaming yourself for doing something that you feel now that you should not have done. And so we
So it's so tricky because you don't want your dog to suffer. You want them
no,
to have a peaceful death,
right.
but you
But you don't want to be pushed into it
no,
like
you don't want to be pushed
right.
into it. But if there's somebody who's an expert
Yeah.
who's telling you, and it is such a fraught
Yes.
moment that you're in. And I 100% agree. Like it would be better to not have that kind of pressure.
Right.
And my vet has said to me, if it were my dog, here's
Yeah.
what I would do,
This is
because
what
I
I would
asked
do.
them.
Right.
And uh, but
And
that's
there are
very
times
different than feeling bullied. And so
there
it's very
yeah.
unfortunate
There are
that she
some
feels
times
bullied.
vets will say, "Do you want another evening?" Or,
Yeah.
"We
Yeah.
believe this needs to happen." It
Yeah.
was unfortunate that this veterinarian was not like that.
Yep. Yep.
So we feel for you, Angela. I'm
We
sorry that
we
you
feel for you, and also, I think the thing is that it's so important to be kind to yourself and realize
Mhm.
that you were in a very pressured situation.
Yeah.
You did the best you could in that moment. We
I know.
often are in an extremely difficult circumstance when our pet is at that time in their lives, when they're at the
Mhm.
very end or very close to their end, and we do the best we can.
Yeah,
And
that's all we
so
can do.
it's so important for you to be forgiving toward yourself,
Mhm.
and to try to just be kind and gentle
Yeah, it's
to
kinda
yourself about this.
right. Try to take care of yourself the best way you can. I know that's just so hard right now. But that's very understandable. A lot of people feel that pressure, and then they suffer with that for a period of time because they believe they did it too soon or they needed time, and you're so emotional at that moment. This is your baby. This is the
Yep.
child. This is who you've loved and taken care of and don't want to see go away, you know.
And we also have seen the other side of that, which is a person who says, "I waited too long."
Yes,
We've
exactly.
seen the other
Mhm,
side
and
where
they
it's like,
suffer too much,
they
right.
suffered too much, we waited too long, and yeah, euthanasia is a wonderful
It's a very
thing,
tricky
but it
process.
very often leaves a lot of loose ends,
Yeah, and a lot of guilt.
a lot of guilt, a lot of
Mhm,
misgivings, and a lot of regrets. And we live with it. And Angela, it's going to get better. You're going to
mhm.
feel better. in the coming days and weeks.
Yes.
Yeah.
But thank you for sharing that. I know that that was a hard thing to do.
Yep. Okay, so I guess we'll wrap up here. Nancy, always a pleasure talking
Mhm.
with you,
Yes.
and we'll thank Susan again for
Her
sharing and
courage.
wish
Yes.
her
That was
well.
also a hard one to share.
Yep, yep. Have a
So
good night.
take care, everyone.